Commander Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of Station Kepler 9, watching the endless dance of starships moving between the massive docking bays. The station stretched for miles in every direction, a testament to what 12 alien species could build when they worked together. Unfortunately, humanity had built most of it, though the history books would never mention that fact. Jake pressed his hand against the cool, metal wall and felt the vibrations of the station's massive engines. Those engines ran on fusion technology that humans had perfected and shared freely with the Galactic Federation 200 years ago. The artificial gravity that kept everyone comfortable came from human innovations in graviton manipulation. Even the air recycling systems that kept 30 million beings alive were based on designs created in human laboratories on Earth. Yet when Jake walked through the corridors of the station, alien beings barely acknowledged his presence. The tall, elegant Velthari swept past him in their flowing robes as if he were invisible. The massive Zephyrians, with their thick armor plating and warrior traditions, looked down at him with obvious disdain. The pale, calculating Nexari watched him with their multiple eyes but never spoke. Unless absolutely necessary. Jake had been commanding the human delegation for 3 years now, and every single day felt like a small defeat. He watched human proposals get dismissed without discussion. He saw human colonies receive the worst assignments and least resources. He witnessed human achievements get credited to other species while human failures were magnified and broadcast. Across the galaxy. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez approached him with another stack of digital reports. She was young, barely 30, with the kind of bright optimism that Jake remembered having when he first joined the diplomatic corps. Amy still believed that hard work and good intentions could change minds and build bridges between species. The morning briefings are ready, sir, Amy said, handing him the data tablet. The Velthari have submitted another proposal to restructure the mining rights in the Centauri system. The Zephyrians want to expand their military patrols into human space. Again, and the Nexari are requesting access to our quantum computing research. Jake scrolled through the reports and felt a familiar tightness in his chest. The Velthari proposal would give them control over asteroid mines that human prospectors had discovered and developed. The Zephyrian military expansion would put their warships in human systems under the pretense of protection. The Nexari request was just another attempt to steal human technology and claim it as their own discovery. What about our proposals from last month? Jake asked, though he already knew the answer from Amy's expression. Still under review, sir. The proposal for human exploration rights in the Outer Rim was tabled indefinitely. The request for equal representation on the Science Council was referred to subcommittee, and our application for increased trade quotas was denied due to alleged administrative irregularities. Jake closed his eyes and tried to remember why he had ever believed diplomacy could work. His father had been one of the first humans to make contact with alien species, back when humanity still thought they were joining a community of equals. His grandfather had fought in the resource wars on Earth, believing he was securing a better future for his children. Both men had died thinking humanity would take its rightful place among the stars. Instead, humanity had become the galaxy's favorite servants. They were useful for their creativity and work ethic, but never quite good enough to be treated as equals. Every human achievement was dismissed as luck or credited to alien mentorship. Every human success was followed by new restrictions and oversight to prevent them from becoming too independent. The morning council session took place in the Great Chamber at the heart of Station Kepler 9, representatives from all 12 Federation species sat in a perfect circle, their seats arranged by protocol that placed humans near the back with the other minor species. Jake and Amy took their assigned positions and waited for the session to begin. High Chancellor Vexler of the Velthari called the session to order with his melodious voice that could make even insults sound like poetry. His blue-tinted skin seemed to glow under the chamber's lights, and his 3 eyes surveyed the assembly with practiced authority. Behind him stood 2 advisors whose only job was to look impressive and remind everyone of Velthari's superiority. Honored representatives, Vexler began, Today we address several matters of pressing concern to Federation stability and prosperity. First, the continued inefficiencies in resource management within certain Outer Rim territories require immediate correction. Jake felt his hands clench involuntarily. The Outer Rim territories were human colonies, established by human explorers and developed through decades of human labor. They were productive, peaceful, and completely self-sufficient. Their only inefficiency was failing to generate enough profit for the Federation's core. Worlds.Warprime Kreltok of the Zephyrians stood to speak next. His massive frame dominated the chamber, and his voice carried the authority of someone who had never been questioned. The scars on his armored hide told stories of battles across a dozen worlds, most of which had been won using human-designed weapons and human tactical support. The Federation cannot allow productive territories to remain under inadequate supervision, Kreltok announced. These colonies require guidance from species with proven administrative capabilities. The Zephyrian Empire volunteers to assume responsibility for defense and governance of these territories. Jake started to rise, but Amy grabbed his arm. She was right to stop him. Speaking out of turn would only result in formal censure and accomplish nothing. But sitting in silence while his people's homes were casually redistributed felt like swallowing poison. The Nexari representative, Ambassador Zephic, activated the translation device that converted his species' complex pheromone language into words other beings could understand. His pale, segmented body remained perfectly still while he spoke, as if emotions were inefficient and unnecessary. Analysis indicates optimal resource utilization requires reassignment of territorial governance to species demonstrating superior organizational metrics. Human administrative performance falls below acceptable standards in 17 key categories. Immediate transfer of authority will result in productivity improvements of approximately 43%. The words hit Jake like physical blows. 17 key categories. 43% improvement. The Nexari had turned the theft of human worlds into a mathematical equation, complete with statistics and projections that no one would question because the Nexari never made computational errors. Other representatives began voicing their support for the proposal. The crystalline Ashkari spoke about resource optimization. The aquatic Morden discussed trade route efficiency. The insectoid Veltar mentioned security concerns. Each species found their own reason to support taking human colonies away from human control. Jake watched it happen with growing numbness. 2 centuries of human contributions to the Federation meant nothing. Decades of loyal service counted for nothing. The lives and dreams of millions of human colonists were just numbers on a spreadsheet to be reorganized for maximum efficiency. When Jake finally tried to speak, to offer even a token protest for the record, he found he could not open his mouth. Amy was struggling beside him, her face flushed with effort as she tried to voice an objection. Around the chamber, other human representatives sat in enforced silence, their bodies rigid with the neural dampening field that the Nexari had activated. Without announcement, High Chancellor Vexther noticed their distress and smiled with what might have been sympathy if it had reached his eyes. The efficiency of this session demonstrates the wisdom of limiting unnecessary debate. The motion regarding territorial reassignment is approved by acclamation. Jake sat in his chair, paralyzed by alien technology, watching his people's future being decided without them having any voice in the matter. The neural field prevented him from moving or speaking, but it could not stop him from thinking. And in that moment of absolute helplessness, Jake Morrison finally understood what his father and grandfather had died for. They had not died for equality or recognition or respect. They had died believing humanity deserved better than this. As the neural field finally released him and feeling returned to his body, Jake realized that his father and grandfather had been right. Humanity did deserve better, and maybe it was time they took it. Dr. Lisa Park finished downloading the last of the xenobiology databases into her encrypted storage device and watched the progress bar reach completion. 300 years of research data, most of it based on human discoveries and insights, now existed safely beyond Federation reach. She had spent the past 72 hours working without Sleep to copy everything she could access from the Central Research Network. Lisa had been the head of xenobiology research at Station Kepler 9 for 8 years, and in all that time she had never seen anything like what was happening now. Every human researcher, technician, and support staff member was quietly packing their personal belongings and submitting resignation letters. No one had told them to do this, but somehow everyone knew it was time. The message had spread through human communities faster than official communications could travel. Jake Morrison's encounter with the Federation Council had been recorded and transmitted through encrypted human networks within hours. The image of human representatives sitting in enforced silence while their colonies were stolen had triggered something deep in the human psyche. Lisa sealed her storage device in a diplomatic pouch and walked through the research laboratories one final time. These facilities had produced breakthrough discoveries in medicine, biology, and technology that had benefited every species in the Federation. The anti-aging treatments that extended Velthri lifespans came from human research. The atmospheric processes that made hostile worlds habitable were based on human innovations. The universal vaccine protocols that prevented interspecies disease transmission had been developed by Lisa herself. None of that seemed to matter anymore. The aliens had made their position clear. Humans were useful servants, nothing more. They could contribute their knowledge and labor, but they would never be treated as equals or given any real authority over their own destiny. Engineer Carl Hughes stood in the main reactor chamber of Mining Station Omega-7, watching the massive fusion generators that powered the entire facility. He had designed the control systems himself, improving on the original human fusion technology to make it safer and more efficient. The station produced rare metals that were essential for starship construction across 12 worlds. Carl had been planning to leave for months, ever since his proposal for improving the reactor efficiency had been rejected in favor of a less effective, but more expensive Nexari alternative. He had stayed because the miners depended on him to keep the reactors running safely. But the events at Station Kepler 9 had changed everything. Carl activated his personal communicator and sent a brief message to his assistant, an eager young Ashkari named Kethelin who had been learning human engineering techniques. Emergency. At home. Must leave immediately. All systems on automatic. Good luck. Then he deleted his access codes from the main computer and walked away from the reactor chamber for the last time. Behind him, automated systems continued running the fusion reactors according to the parameters he had set years ago. The reactors would keep working for months, maybe even years, but nobody else on the station understood the subtle adjustments and maintenance procedures that kept them operating at peak efficiency. When problems eventually arose, the miners would discover just how much they had depended on human expertise. Captain Susan Blake received the encrypted transmission while her transport ship, the New Dakota, was hauling industrial supplies to the Rigel colonies. The message contained navigation coordinates for a location in the abandoned Titan system, along with a single line of text: "Come home, Susan, it's time." Susan recognized the voice encryption pattern as belonging to her old friend Richard Stone, which should have been impossible. Richard had died in a shuttle accident 5 years ago while conducting a routine survey mission. Susan had attended his memorial service and watched his widow cry over an empty casket. Yet the transmission was definitely authentic, containing security codes that only Richard would know. Susan changed course without hesitation, telling her crew that they had received new orders from Human Command. The crew did not question her decision. They had all heard about the Federation Council meeting and the neural dampening field that had silenced human representatives. Like humans everywhere, they felt a mixture of rage and helplessness that demanded action. The journey to the Titan system took 6 days, during which Susan monitored increasing reports of human withdrawals from Federation facilities. Human doctors were leaving alien hospitals, taking their medical knowledge with them. Human teachers were abandoning alien schools, leaving students without access to human educational methods that had proven superior to traditional alien approaches. Human merchants were closing their businesses and liquidating their assets. The aliens initially dismissed these departures as emotional reactions that would fade once humans realized they had nowhere else to go. The Zephyrian military leadership issued statements about maintaining order and preventing human hysteria from disrupting Federation operations. The Velthari diplomatic corps expressed disappointment in human behavior and offered counseling services to help humans accept their proper place in galactic society. But as days passed and more humans continued disappearing, some alien leaders began expressing concern. Trade routes that had been maintained by human navigators for decades suddenly became unreliable. Scientific research projects ground to a halt when human researchers failed to report for duty. Manufacturing facilities experienced mysterious equipment failures when human technicians were no longer available to perform maintenance. Susan arrived in the Titan system expecting to find empty space and dead worlds. Instead, her sensors detected hundreds of ships moving between the moons of the gas giant. As she approached the coordinates from Richard's message, she saw something that made her question her own sanity. A massive construction facility stretched across the dark side of Titan's largest moon, hidden from long-range sensors by the moon's bulk and protected by stealth technology that Susan did not recognize. Hundreds of ships were docked at the facility, including many that were supposedly lost or destroyed over the past decade. Workers in environmental suits moved between the ships, loading supplies and making modifications that looked like weapons installations. Susan docked the new Dakota at the assigned berth and found herself face-to-face with Richard Stone, looking exactly as she remembered him except for a few gray hairs and laugh lines around his eyes. He hugged her tightly and grinned at her shocked expression. "I know this is a lot to take in," Richard said. "But we needed everyone to believe I was dead so I could work on this project without Federation oversight. Welcome to Project Exodus." "Susan, welcome to humanity's real future." Richard led her through corridors filled with human workers who should have been scattered across the galaxy. Susan recognized faces from her academy days, people she had thought were dead or retired or simply lost to time. They were all here, all working together on something that the Federation had never suspected. "How long has this been going on?" Susan asked as they walked past laboratories filled with technology she did not recognize. "We started planning this 30 years ago, right after the Velthari refused to grant humans equal voting rights in the Federation Council. We realized that peaceful negotiation would never work. The aliens will never see us as equals because they need us to be inferior. It justifies their treatment of us and makes them feel better about themselves." They entered a massive chamber, where dozens of ships were under construction using manufacturing techniques that seemed decades ahead of current Federation technology. The ships were sleek and powerful, designed along human aesthetic principles but incorporating systems that Susan could not identify. "We have been preparing for this day for 3 decades, Richard continued. "Every human who supposedly died in accidents or disappeared on exploration missions actually came here to work on Exodus. Every human scientist who made a breakthrough. Discovery shared that knowledge with us before sharing it with the Federation. Every human engineer who learned alien technology brought that information back to improve our own designs." Susan stared at the ships being built around them and felt a mixture of awe and pride that she had not experienced in years. For the first time since joining the Federation, she was looking at something that belonged entirely to humanity, created by human hands and human minds without alien oversight or approval. "The Federation thinks they can redistribute our colonies and silence our voices because we have nowhere else to go," Richard said. "They are about to learn how wrong they are. Humanity has been building its own future while they were busy treating us like servants. And now that future is ready to become reality?" Commander Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of Station Kepler 9 for what he knew would be the last time. The station felt different now, almost empty despite the thousands of alien beings who still lived and worked there. The absence of humans was like a missing heartbeat, noticeable in ways that most aliens had not yet begun to understand. Jake had requested one final meeting with the Federation Council, and to his surprise, they had agreed immediately. High Chancellor Vexler had even seemed eager to arrange the meeting, probably expecting either human surrender or desperate attempts at negotiation. The aliens still believed they held all the power in this situation. Sergeant Helen Carter walked beside Jake as they made their way to the council chamber. She had been his military aide for 3 years, a quiet and unremarkable woman who handled security arrangements and administrative duties with efficient professionalism. Helen never spoke unless directly addressed, never offered opinions on policy matters, and never drew attention to herself in any way. Jake had always appreciated Helen's steady presence, but today she seemed different somehow. There was something in her posture and the way she moved that reminded Jake of the Special Forces soldiers he had known during his brief military service years ago. He wondered if the stress of recent events was affecting his perception, making him see things that were not really there. The council chamber looked exactly the same as it had a week ago when Jake had been silenced by the neural dampening field. The same circular arrangement of seats, the same elaborate decorations meant to showcase the cultural achievements of 12 different species, the same sense of ancient authority that was supposed to intimidate anyone who dared challenge Federation wisdom, but Jake felt no intimidation now. The past week had shown him something that changed everything. As humans disappeared from Federation facilities across the galaxy, critical systems had begun failing in ways that revealed just how dependent the aliens had become on human knowledge. And labor. The Velthry mining operations in the Centauri system had experienced 17 major equipment failures in 6 days. Without human engineers to maintain the delicate balance of atmospheric processors and gravitational compensators, several mines had been forced to shut down completely. The Velthry had tried to fix the problems using their own technicians, but their elegant, theoretical knowledge proved useless when dealing with practical mechanical issues. The Zephyrian military had discovered that their latest warships would not function properly without the targeting systems that human programmers had designed and maintained. 3 of their most advanced battlecruisers were currently stranded in dock because nobody else understood the complex algorithms that managed their weapon arrays and defensive shields. The Nexari had found that their precious computational networks were experiencing cascade failures without human oversight. The quantum processing cores that handled interstellar communications were overheating because human technicians were no longer available to perform the microscopic adjustments that kept them stable. All 12 Federation species were beginning to realize that humans had been far more than just useful servants. They had been the invisible foundation that kept galactic civilization functioning smoothly. And now that foundation was crumbling. Jake took his seat in the council chamber and waited for the session to begin. Helen stood behind him in her usual position, hands clasped behind her back, eyes focused on nothing in particular. The alien representatives filed in with their typical displays of importance and authority, but Jake noticed signs of stress that had not been there a week ago. High Chancellor Vexler's blue skin looked slightly pale, and his usually perfect grooming showed small imperfections that suggested he had been working without adequate rest. War-Prime Kreltok's armor bore scratches and dents that he normally would have repaired immediately, indicating that even basic maintenance was becoming difficult without human support staff. Ambassador Zephyk of the Nexari moved with less than his usual fluid precision, suggesting that the computational problems affecting his species were impacting his own cybernetic enhancements. The other representatives showed similar subtle signs of the chaos that was spreading through their civilizations. Commander Morrison, Vexler began, his melodious voice carrying an undertone of strain that he was trying to hide, we have called this meeting to discuss the recent departures of human personnel from Federation facilities. While we respect individual choices regarding employment, the coordinated nature of these departures suggests organized resistance to legitimate Federation authority. Jake stood slowly and looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. These beings controlled the destinies of trillions of sentient creatures across hundreds of worlds. They commanded fleets of starships and armies of soldiers. They possessed technology that could reshape planets and harness the power of stars themselves, but they had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that power meant the same thing as competence. "Honored representatives," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber without any of the deference that had marked his previous speeches, "I stand before you today to deliver a simple message. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Federation. All human personnel, resources, and territories are hereby removed from Federation jurisdiction." The silence that followed Jake's announcement was profound. Several alien representatives exchanged glances of confusion as if they had not heard correctly. War Prime Kreltok leaned forward in his massive chair, his scarred face showing the first signs of genuine concern. "Commander," Vexler said carefully, "perhaps you do not fully understand the implications of what you are suggesting. Humanity depends on Federation protection, trade agreements, and technological support for its survival. Without Federation membership, human colonies would be vulnerable to attack. Human trade would collapse, and human civilization would quickly regress to primitive levels." Jake smiled, and the expression seemed to unsettle several of the alien representatives. "Your Excellency, you have made the same mistake that powerful beings have been making for millennia. You have confused cooperation with dependence. You assume that because we worked with you, we needed you. You thought that because we accepted your authority, we could not survive without it." Jake activated his personal data device and projected a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. The display showed detailed statistics and charts that documented human contributions to Federation society over the past 2 centuries. The numbers were staggering and undeniable. 47% of all scientific breakthroughs in Federation history came from human researchers, Jake continued. 62% of all exploration missions were planned and executed by human crews. 38% of all infrastructure maintenance across Federation space was performed by human technicians. Humans designed your communication networks, maintain your power systems, and operate your transportation hubs. The holographic display shifted to show real-time reports from across Federation space. Equipment failures, system breakdowns, and operational difficulties were spreading like a virus through alien civilizations. The reports painted a picture of infrastructure collapse that was accelerating with each passing hour. Ambassador Zethic activated his translation device, his pale form trembling slightly with what might have been rage or fear. "Statistical analysis indicates human withdrawal will cause temporary operational difficulties, but alternative solutions exist. Nexari computational models predict full recovery within acceptable timeframes." Jake's smile widened. "Ambassador, your computational models are failing because the quantum cores that run them are overheating. The humans who knew how to maintain those cores are gone. Your alternative solutions require knowledge and skills that your species never bothered to develop because you always had humans to do the work for you." Helen Carter stepped forward from her position behind Jake's chair. For 3 years, she had been invisible to the alien representatives, just another unremarkable human in military uniform. Now she spoke for the first time in any council session, and her voice carried an authority that made several aliens sit back in their chairs. "I am Colonel Helen Carter, Human Military Intelligence," she announced, her quiet demeanor replaced by the bearing of a professional soldier. "For the past 3 years, I have operated under deep cover as Sergeant Carter, gathering intelligence on Federation military capabilities, strategic resources, and operational procedures." The impact of Helen's revelation rippled through the chamber like a physical force. War Prime Kreltok's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon before stopping as he realized the implications of what he was hearing. If one unremarkable human aide was actually a military intelligence officer, how many other humans had been operating under false identities? "I am not alone," Helen continued. 47 human intelligence operatives have spent the past decade mapping every Federation installation, analyzing every defense system, and documenting every strategic vulnerability. We have complete intelligence files on military positions, trade routes, resource stockpiles, and communication networks for all 12 Federation species. War Prime Kreltok stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds, watching the massive Federation fleet assemble around him. 300 warships from 8 different species had answered his call to arms, representing the largest military force the galaxy had seen in over a century. The sight should have filled him with confidence and pride, but instead he felt an unfamiliar sensation that took him several minutes to identify as doubt. The past 2 weeks had been the worst in Kreltok's long military career. Human withdrawals from Federation space had accelerated into what could only be described as a complete evacuation. Entire human colonies had simply vanished overnight, leaving behind empty buildings and abandoned infrastructure. Human crews had disappeared from Federation ships, taking with them the technical knowledge needed to operate critical systems. Most disturbing of all, human intelligence officers had begun revealing themselves across Federation space, calmly, announcing their true identities before departing for unknown destinations. Colonel Helen Carter had not been an isolated case. Dozens of humans who had worked in sensitive positions for years or even decades had turned out to be deep cover operatives gathering information about Federation capabilities. Kreltok's own fleet had been infiltrated by at least 12 human spies, including his chief navigation officer and 2 of his tactical advisors. They had access to classified battle plans, weapon specifications, and strategic communications for over a decade. The security implications were staggering, but Kreltok had no choice except to proceed with military action. The Federation Council had ordered him to force human compliance through overwhelming displays of power. The humans had clearly overestimated their own capabilities and underestimated Federation resolve. A swift military response would demonstrate the consequences of defying legitimate galactic authority and encourage humans to return to their proper place in Federation society. Admiral Kevin Ross watched the approaching Federation fleet from the command center of Titan Base, humanity's hidden stronghold in the abandoned star system. The alien ships appeared on his tactical displays as hundreds of red symbols moving in perfect formation toward the coordinates where human colonies were supposed to be located. Kevin had been preparing for this moment for 15 years, since he had faked his own death in a shuttle accident and joined Project Exodus. He was one of the best tactical minds humanity had ever produced, with a natural gift for understanding how different species thought and fought. The Federation had trained him in their military academies and given him access to their strategic planning. Never suspecting that he was memorizing everything for future use, the human defense fleet consisted of only 43 ships, seemingly impossible odds against the Federation armada. But Kevin was not concerned about the numbers. The Federation had no idea what they were about to face, and their overconfidence would be their downfall. Lieutenant Commander Nancy Wright ran through her final pre-flight checks aboard the experimental fighter Phoenix 7. The ship was unlike anything that existed in Federation space, incorporating technologies that human scientists had developed in secret over the past 30 years. The fusion drive could accelerate at rates that would crush most alien physiology. The quantum tunneling system could phase the ship partially out of normal space, making it effectively untouchable by conventional weapons. Nancy had been testing prototype fighters for 5 years, pushing human engineering to its absolute limits, while Federation scientists remained satisfied with incremental improvements to existing alien designs. The aliens had grown comfortable with their technological superiority, assuming that human contributions were limited to maintenance and minor modifications of alien innovations. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The first contact between human and Federation forces occurred at the edge of the Proxima system, where the aliens expected to find human colonies ripe for recapture. Instead, they encountered 12 human ships arranged in a defensive formation that seemed almost casual in its lack of concern for the overwhelming odds. "Captain," Tony Garcia commanded the human flagship Independence, a vessel that looked like nothing the Federation had ever seen. The ship's hull incorporated stealth composites that made it difficult to target, while its weapon systems were based on principles that human physicists had discovered by combining alien theories in ways that aliens had never attempted. Federation Fleet. Tony broadcast on open channels. You are entering human sovereign space without authorization. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences of your actions. War Prime Kreltok responded with the contempt that such human arrogance deserved. Human vessel, you will surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will be met with overwhelming force. You are outnumbered 25-1 and hopelessly outgunned. Tony's response was a single word that would be remembered throughout galactic history: no. The battle that followed lasted exactly 17 minutes and changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The Federation fleet attacked with conventional tactics that had proven successful for centuries, using massed formations and concentrated firepower to overwhelm enemy defenses. The human ships responded with maneuvers that seemed to violate the laws of physics. Nancy Wright's fighter Phoenix 7 phased in and out of normal space, appearing behind Federation ships to deliver devastating attacks before vanishing again. The human vessels moved with impossible agility, dodging weapons fire that should have been unavoidable, while returning fire with energy weapons that cut through alien shields like they were made of paper. Lieutenant Commander Dave Russell piloted the destroyer New Hope through the middle of the Federation formation, his ship's AI-assisted targeting systems locking onto 12 different enemy vessels simultaneously. The artificial intelligence had been trained using combat data from every military engagement in Federation history, giving it the ability to predict alien tactics with uncanny accuracy. Within minutes, the Federation's perfect formation had dissolved into chaos. Ships that had fought together for decades found themselves unable to coordinate their attacks against opponents who seemed to anticipate every move. The Zephyrium battlecruiser Hammer of Justice exploded in a brilliant flash when its shields failed under bombardment from weapons that should not have been able to penetrate its armor. The Velthary command ship Eternal Glory lost power when human hackers infiltrated its computer systems and shut down critical functions remotely. The elegant vessel drifted helplessly while smaller human ships picked off its escort fighters with surgical precision. Kreltok watched his fleet being systematically destroyed and felt something he had never experienced before in decades of military service: complete helplessness. His weapons could not hit targets that flickered in and out of existence. His shields could not stop weapons that bypassed conventional defenses. His tactical computers could not analyze enemy movements that defied all known principles of space. Combat. All ships retreat, Kreltok ordered, his voice carrying none of its usual authority. Fall back to minimum safe distance and regroup. The Federation fleet limped away from the battlefield, having lost over 90 ships without destroying a single human vessel. The survivors carried with them reports that would terrify military commanders across the galaxy. Humans had not simply matched Federation technology. They had surpassed it by decades or possibly centuries. Dr. Richard Stone sat in his laboratory aboard Titan Base, monitoring the battle through quantum communication links. As Director of Human Military Research, he had overseen the development of every weapon and defense system that was currently devastating the Federation fleet. The technologies had been developed slowly and carefully over 30 years, hidden from alien oversight by researchers who were supposed to be dead. Phase 1 complete, Richard announced to his assembled staff. The Federation now understands that military force will not resolve this situation in their favor. They will attempt negotiations next, probably offering limited concessions in exchange for human cooperation. Richard turned to address the hundreds of human scientists and engineers who had sacrificed their identities and their lives to make this moment possible. We have demonstrated that humanity can defend itself against any threat the Federation can deploy. Now we must prove that we can build something better than what we are leaving behind. The news of the Federation's military defeat spread across the galaxy within hours, carried by survivors who could barely comprehend what they had witnessed. The impossible had happened. A minor species with primitive technology had completely outfought the combined might of 12 advanced civilizations. On worlds throughout Federation space, alien leaders gathered in emergency sessions to reassess everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. The creatures they had dismissed as useful servants had somehow developed military technology that made Federation forces look like children playing with toys. Admiral Kevin Ross allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he reviewed the battle. Reports: 0 human casualties against overwhelming odds. Complete tactical victory using weapons and techniques that the enemy could not understand or counter. High Chancellor Vexler stood before the ruins of what had once been the greatest civilization in galactic history, and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. 6 months had passed since humanity's withdrawal from the Federation, and the consequences were far worse than anyone had imagined possible. The Centauri mining operations had completely shut down after 17 critical system failures that nobody could repair. The atmospheric processors on 12 different worlds were failing without human maintenance, forcing the evacuation of millions of colonists. Trade routes that had connected the galaxy for centuries were now unusable because the navigation systems depended on human-designed quantum computers that no one else understood. Most devastating of all, the scientific research that had driven Federation progress for 200 years had simply stopped. Without human creativity and innovation, alien scientists found themselves unable to solve problems that had seemed routine. When humans were available to provide insights and alternative perspectives, Vexler activated his personal communicator and sent a priority message to Jake Morrison, requesting an immediate meeting to discuss what the official diplomatic language called mutually beneficial arrangements. The reality was simpler and more humiliating. The Federation was begging for mercy from the species they had spent centuries treating as servants. Jake Morrison received the communication request while standing on the observation deck of the Independence, humanity's newest and most advanced starship. Captain Tony Garcia had offered him the honor of commanding the vessel, but Jake preferred his role as Earth's first independent ambassador. Diplomacy was his calling, even when it involved dealing with beings who had silenced him with neural dampening fields. The ship itself was a testament to what humanity could accomplish when freed from Federation oversight and limitations. The Independence stretched for over 2 miles, incorporating technologies that made Federation vessels look like primitive chemical rockets. The quantum drives could cross the galaxy in weeks rather than months. The defensive systems could withstand attacks from entire fleets. The manufacturing facilities could produce anything from food to starships using nothing more than raw energy and basic materials. But the most impressive thing about the Independence was not its technology. It was the fact that every system had been designed, built, and operated entirely by humans working together toward a common goal. No alien oversight, no Federation regulations, no restrictions based on species classifications or political considerations. Jake accepted Vexler's meeting request and specified that it would take place aboard the Independence. The symbolic importance was clear. For the first time in Federation history, alien leaders would come to humans as supplicants rather than the other way around. Dr. Lisa Park walked through the corridors of New Geneva, humanity's first independent space city, watching children play in parks while their parents worked on projects that would reshape the galaxy. The city floated in the L4 point between Earth and Luna, a massive rotating habitat that provided comfortable living space for 3 million humans. Lisa had been appointed as Director of Human Xenological Affairs, responsible for managing humanity's relationships with alien species. It was a position that would have been impossible under Federation rule, where humans were never allowed to hold authority over interspecies relations. The irony was not lost on her. For decades, she had studied alien biology and psychology while being treated as a second-class citizen by the very beings she was trying to understand. Now, those same aliens were desperate for her knowledge and expertise, willing to negotiate as equals because they had no other choice. Lisa reviewed the reports from human colonies throughout the galaxy. The withdrawing humans had not simply disappeared. They had established new settlements in star systems that the Federation had declared uninhabitable or strategically worthless. Using advanced terraforming technology and closed-loop life support systems, humans were building a civilization that did not depend on anyone else for survival. The alien delegates arrived aboard the Independence in a small convoy of ships that looked shabby compared to human vessels. High Chancellor Vexler led the delegation, his usual elegant composure replaced by the desperate urgency of someone whose entire civilization was collapsing around him. Warprime Kreltok accompanied. The Velthari leader, his massive frame somehow diminished by the knowledge that his military might was useless against human technology. Ambassador Zethik of the Nexari moved with mechanical precision, but his multiple eyes showed signs of stress that suggested even his species' vaunted computational abilities were failing without human support. Representatives from all 12 Federation species had come to beg for terms, though they would never admit it publicly. The proud beings who had once casually redistributed human colonies now faced the complete dissolution of their interstellar government. Jake met the alien delegation in the Independence's main conference room, a space designed to accommodate different alien physiologies while subtly demonstrating human technological capabilities. The walls displayed real-time images of human ships exploring previously unknown regions of space, human colonies thriving on worlds that aliens had considered uninhabitable, and human research stations making discoveries that would advance scientific knowledge by centuries. Your Excellencies, Jake began, using the formal address that alien leaders expected even though they no longer deserved it. Thank you for accepting our invitation to discuss the future of interstellar relations. Vexler struggled to maintain his diplomatic training as he delivered what amounted to a surrender speech disguised as a negotiation proposal. Commander Morrison, the Federation recognizes that recent events have created certain difficulties in our relationship with humanity. We are prepared to offer significant concessions in exchange for renewed cooperation. Jake listened to the list of concessions with something approaching amusement. Equal voting rights in Federation councils, increased territorial allocations, reduced oversight of human research projects, and expanded trade quotas. 6 months ago, any one of these offers would have represented a major victory for human diplomacy. Now they seem pathetically inadequate. Your Excellency, Jake replied, I appreciate the Federation's willingness to negotiate, but I think you misunderstand the current situation. Humanity is no longer interested in Federation membership. We are offering you the opportunity to join U.S. in creating something better. Dr. Lisa Park activated the holographic display system and presented humanity's terms for a new interstellar organization. The Galactic Federation would be dissolved and replaced by the Interstellar Cooperative, an organization based on equality rather than species hierarchy. All members would have equal voting rights regardless of their technological level or military power. Scientific research would be shared freely among all species. Trade agreements would be negotiated fairly without coercion or intimidation. Most importantly, no species would ever again be classified as superior or inferior to any other. The alien delegates listened to these terms with growing desperation. They had expected to negotiate concessions that would restore the old system with minor modifications. Instead, they were being offered membership in a completely new organization that would eliminate their privileged positions forever, but they had no choice. Without human knowledge and labor, their civilizations were collapsing. Their military forces had proven useless against human technology. Their economic systems were failing without human innovation and work ethic. They could accept humanity's terms or watch their societies crumble into primitive chaos. Ambassador Zethik was the first to formally accept the terms, his computational mind recognizing that cooperation was the only logical choice. Warprime Kreltok followed, acknowledging that military might meant nothing without the technological foundation to support it. One by one, the other representatives agreed to dissolve the Federation and join the Interstellar Cooperative, HFY. Chancellor Vexter was the last to speak, his melodious voice carrying none of its former authority. The Velthari Empire formally accepts these terms and requests membership in the Interstellar Cooperative. We acknowledge that our previous treatment of humanity was based on false assumptions about species' capabilities and inherent worth. Jake nodded gravely, accepting the formal surrender without any display of triumph or satisfaction. Welcome to the Interstellar Cooperative. We look forward to working with you as equals. 6 months later, Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of New Geneva, watching human children learn alongside young aliens in integrated schools where no species was considered superior to any other. Through the viewing ports, human ships could be seen departing for unexplored sectors of the galaxy, carrying mixed crews of humans and aliens working together toward common goals. The transformation had been remarkable. The Velthari had proven to be gifted artists and philosophers when freed from the burden of maintaining aristocratic superiority. The Zephyrians had become excellent engineers and explorers when their warrior culture was channeled toward constructive purposes. Even the Nexari had shown unexpected creativity when they stopped trying to reduce everything to mathematical formulas.